I was diagnosed on June 23rd, 2012 at 10:28 a.m., but who's counting? Obviously, it was a moment in my life where everything changed. I was actually in the doctor's office for some very, very routine allergy testing. I had just played in a golf tournament, qualified for the state championships, and found out that I couldn't breathe, and my eyes were puffing up, and my throat was very, very sore, and I needed to figure out what was going on, and I assumed it was allergies. I went into the doctor's office to my local allergist, who I had been a patient of for a very, very long time. It turns out that I'm allergic to grass, which is not a very good thing for golf. As part of that testing that she did for me, and she is, to this date, not actually known why she did it, she asked me if I'd like to have an endoscopy. Now, would I like to have is a for those of you who've ever had one of those, it is not pleasant. They stick this thing up your nose, it goes down your throat, it's got a camera on it, they numb it all up. It's decidedly unpleasant. Having said that, she did the test, and as she was doing it, I remember an old joke that said, the one thing you don't ever want to hear from your doctor is the word oops. The other thing that you never want to hear from your doctor is the sound of that sharp intake of breath where something surprising has just happened. And so she was sitting very close next to me. I turned towards her, and she turned towards me, and she had an absolute look of terror on her face. She was beginning to well up with tears, and in that instant, I thought, something isn't right here. She turned to me and said, with tears in her eyes, she said, Lee, I don't know how to tell you this, but I believe you have stage 3+ throat cancer. Now, I thought she was joking. It was so shocking to me. She has a sense of humor. She has a wicked sense of humor. I assumed that she was joking, so I literally kind of gently punched her in the arm and said, that's not a funny joke. And she now started to weep and said, Lee, I'm not joking. It's the absolute truth. I'm 99% sure, we'll have to do a few more tests, but I'm 99% sure that you have stage 3+ throat cancer. And with those words, my life changed irrevocably and forever. That's my story. That was 2 years ago. I am now thrilled and proud to say, through the efforts of the cancer support community and a lot of other incredibly smart people, that I am 100% cancer-free as of a month ago. So, yay for me and yay for the people who cared for me. And really applause to all of you that are doing your work for those of us who are stricken with cancer and now survivors to make our journey easier. Please.
So we've heard a lot today.
Yes, we have.
And I'd love for you to share your reactions to what you've heard today through the video or through any of the speakers.
Sure. Well, first of all, I've watched the video probably 10 times, and not to watch myself, I assure you, although, okay, that had a little bit to do with it the first time around. But some of the things that occurred to me as I read the study and watched the movie is that through my whole journey, which took almost a year of treatment, I had 3 bouts of chemo and another 35 doses. Is that the right word? Doses of radiation? Is that the right word? Doses? Treatments of radiation. During all of that process for a year, no one ever sat down with me and went over the costs. No one ever reviewed for me the costs of the treatment or the costs of what it would be like if I had to stop work, which I clearly had to do. There was no way in the world that I could work with the treatment. They were rigorous, to say the least, and extremely painful and debilitating. Nobody helped us ferret out and figure out the impact of my wife having to take care of me and that impact on her work as a costume designer in Hollywood. So we were left to, when we were first diagnosed, we were so panicked that we literally started treatment within days. So there wasn't much time to get to the bottom of all of the details of all of the courses of treatment and all of the costs involved. So that's number one, is it would have been wonderful had they sat me down and go, okay, Lee, here are all the treatments, which they did wonderfully well. I knew what I was going to do, at least in terms of the chemo and the radiation. What I didn't know was the other part. It would have been great if they'd have sat down, if someone had sat down with me and gone over that in detail so that I could have been better prepared. Secondly, what I learned from this study is that 37%, I believe is the number, 37% of the people who go through cancer treatment are deeply concerned about bankruptcy. About bankruptcy. Now here they are already fighting a life-threatening disease. Period, end of story. And they've probably gotten into it based on the numbers from the study without a clear knowledge of what the financial impact is. And then, on top of all of that, once they've gotten into it and gotten going and beginning to get the treatment and seeing the results, they're faced with a decision of, do I continue to do my treatments as prescribed? Or do I put my family into a life-threatening financial situation that will threaten my family, my family's future, and all of the plans that we had for our family? So that to me is catastrophic. The simple fact is that no one should have to fight for their life and face bankruptcy. Not in this country, not in the wealthiest country on the face of the planet. Nobody should have to face that kind of a decision. Should I get my treatment or should I try to provide for my family? Unacceptable. And thirdly is that over all of the course of this, and I will tell you that towards the end of my treatment, without going into a long story about it because I know we don't have a lot of time, but I became suicidal. I became suicidal. And the simple fact of the matter is that I was totally isolated. I had my wife, which was wonderful and an absolute blessing from God. But I didn't know how depressed I was. I wasn't even sure what depression was. What I knew was that I didn't want to live anymore. And I decided that the best way for me to proceed with the financial rigors of cancer treatment was to figure out a way to go to sleep, not wake up, make it look like an accident, and hope that we could collect on a key man insurance policy that was given to us or as part of our compensation from the studio. What needs to happen more than anything in my personal experience with cancer care is that caregivers need to recognize that our psychosocial needs are enormously compromised when we undergo cancer treatment on every level, on a physical level, on an emotional level, on a psychological level, and on a spiritual level. And when those needs aren't met, we suffer more, and in the worst case scenarios, we give up or we decide to end our lives, either by doing something actively or by foregoing treatment. And that is a shame. It is simply a matter of recognizing the need for psychosocial care, like what the cancer support community provides. And I will tell you that the cancer support community meant the difference between life and death for me. Very soon after I was suicidal and wishing to die, just by the sheerest of good luck, through no recommendations, I ended up at the cancer support community. And I will tell you that all of their wide variety of services, the vast majority of which I have taken advantage of, and do to this day, 2 years after I was declared cancer-free, in support groups for survivors, because our experience doesn't end with our quote, cure. So I am eternally grateful for that. And I think that if caregivers could incorporate that need to screen people for distress, find out what that level is, and take appropriate action by either referring them or providing them with care, it would make an enormous difference in our cancer journey.
So I'm going to throw a surprise question at you.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So you heard me say that his experience was heartbreaking and that he's done amazing things with that experience. Tell everybody what you did yesterday.
I had an extraordinary privilege yesterday. Yesterday, some people, including Linda, went up to the house, I went up to the hill, as I've learned it's called, and I was able to participate in some legislative discussions about that specific subject, about supplying psychosocial, about the need and the necessity for supplying psychosocial care for cancer patients. It is now clear, the World Health Organization and many, many, many others say that it is not, in order to get ideal cancer care, it has to include, not it should include, or it might include, or wouldn't it be nice if it did, but psychosocial care must be an integral part of care for cancer patients. Yesterday I had the privilege of sitting into a conversation that was writing that legislation into a bill that would become law. That's a big deal, and it's very exciting. And my simple part of that was to simply listen and enjoy and realize the movement where 20 years ago, psychosocial care was not even part of the conversation. Now it's a critical part of it. Now it's going to be part of legislation with clinical trials. And that is simply going to have, we all know that our minds dramatically impact our bodies. I mean, now we know that. All you have to do is watch sports. But what's interesting is that in the area of cancer, we seem to have forgotten that. We need to add that back. It's critical.
And coincidentally, we saw a law that was framed on the wall. Do you want to share that? I still owe you those pictures, but I do have those.
We walked into the office and they had a copy of the Affordable Care Act, which has dramatically decreased the amount. I'm not telling you something you don't know, but I was startled by the numbers today of how many people who didn't have insurance at all were uncovered, whether they had cancer or otherwise, that not only allows them to be able to afford insurance, but also makes sure that even with pre-existing conditions, that they get the treatment they need. And I got to stand and get a picture next to that actual very law in a frame in the office where we had our meetings. Very exciting to me, and very exciting to many of the people that I know in the cancer support community.
Yeah. It's been a great couple days for us. Thank you.
It has been.
Yep. So based on your experience over the last several years, and your experience yesterday, your experience today, because a lot of us will be on the Hill tomorrow or Monday, and we're doing work not on the Hill, what one thing would you suggest that we focus our work around?
I would say it's actually, if I can say it's two, I would say it's two.
You can have two.
One is we need to work on the price. We need to work on the cost for cancer care. Believe me, after listening to the presentations today, it is and yesterday as well, it is extraordinarily complicated. I get that. But at the end of the day, it comes down to people like me. People who have cancer, people who are fighting for their lives, people who are fighting for their families' lives, who need to have the help and the ability financially to be able to afford the extraordinary kind of care that we have in this country that's available, that makes our survival rates higher than Europe, higher than other places. And we need to be able to make that affordable for all of the people in this country, not just the affluent. And secondly is we have to recognize the essential need of psychosocial care, which will help us mobilize our bodies, our minds, and our spirits to fight cancer as well. And that needs to be included in everybody's treatment and made affordable so that it can be.
Great, thank you. And I'd love to take a couple of questions, if you have any for Lee.
Hurdles were that she faced taking care of you, helping you navigate?
Yeah, I would argue, and this is something that's often forgotten, and it's a tragedy that it is. You know, clearly the person who's undergoing cancer treatment is under an enormous amount of stress and strain and pain and discomfort and all of those different kinds of things. I mean, that's clear. What's often forgotten is that those caregivers, particularly husbands and wives of people who are going through the experience, suffer as much or more and in different ways than we do. And I will tell you that without my wife, I would be dead. She was given the kind of support that she needed, again, very late in the process, which is the sad part, because we just didn't know that we needed it. We didn't know that it was available, sometimes for free. particularly at the cancer support community, where all of those services for sufferers as well as survivors are available at a very low or no cost basis. That's extraordinary. So they are some of the overlooked people in this process, I think, and she had to take off time from work, which impacted her career. It was a misery for her, and I am eternally grateful every day of my life, which I now have as a large result because of her, for her work. Anytime I would go to sleep, she would be awake. She'd be afraid, was I breathing? Was I able to swallow? Was I going to be throwing up? Was I going to have sore? Whatever the issues were, she was awake and vigilant 24 hours a day for a year, and then has been since as well. So it's a tough road for them, and I have infinite respect for caregivers in addition to sufferers. Well, I have to be honest with you. I was two things. I was in total shock. I was numb. I literally, when I would think about it, it just didn't seem possible. I mean, I never drank, I never smoked. I asked my caregivers, why me? And their answer was bad luck, which was a very incomplete answer as far as I was concerned, but there really wasn't a reason. It's just wrong place, wrong time. But as I began to get used to the idea of it, I got more into, so what are going to be the side effects of the treatment? Because that was really important to me. I'm an entrepreneur by nature and by profession. And I had some projects, doesn't matter what they were, but I had some projects that I was working on that required my personal attention. And so I was curious whether or not these would impact that. And the answers were that nobody really knew. Well, you could have a little of this, you could have a little of that. And so I went into it not completely, but largely uninformed as to most of the side effects. And for whatever reason, they were minimized. I thought, honestly, I'm a former professional athlete, I'm a marathon runner, I'm a mountain climber, I'm all of these different things. I can handle this. I can handle it physically, and I can handle it psychologically. And I was completely wrong. I was just ill-informed on that. So I tried to do some research and tried to find out. It didn't help much. And then I was almost immediately into the treatment. I mean, within days of when, I didn't get to play in the state championships, which really broke my heart because I was playing really well. And I thought I had a chance to qualify for the final day for the first time in my life, which is a big, big, big deal in California. But we started very quickly. So a lot of that work went to my wife, and she did the research. She looked up the drugs. She looked up the different options. She did all of that. She took responsibility, and I started throwing up within minutes of my first treatment. It was quite a road. My original person, Dr. Putnam, who diagnosed me, said, "You're going to have the worst year of your life." That was an understatement, and I dramatically underestimated the size of that statement. It was much, much, much harder than I thought it was, and way beyond my ability as a single human, even with the help of my wife, way beyond my ability to handle it by myself. No one should have to handle this by themselves. There needs to be a community. Sustained by community, it's critical, absolutely critical. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Great. I'm going to give you the final word before I do a little bit of a summary.
Well, first of all, what I really want to do is thank all of you that are involved in any aspect of cancer care, support, legislation, whatever it is. We have an opportunity. The medicines that are available, the treatments that are available are the best that they have ever been in history dramatically. The amount of survivors that survive now for a longer period of time is much higher than it used to be. Your work is God's work. You are literally saving lives. Let's just remember that there are people that are being lost in the shuffle that oughtn't to be, and that ought to be able to take advantage of our incredible advances in medicine to be able to live their lives as fully and as happily as they humanly possibly can. So I thank you and I applaud you for what you're doing in this effort. Please redouble your efforts. Every day that you do, more lives are saved, and every day that you don't, more lives are lost that could have been saved if your efforts were doubled and tripled. So thank you, thank you, thank you.